from the chat. Somebody from the chat was already asking about that they are muted, but this is like that because this is a webinar. This is not a Zoom meeting. So we can, we are going to unmute you when we come to the discussion. So you can also ask questions and comments. So thank you very much, Rebecca, for organizing this. As Rebecca said, we are organizing this in the frame of the World Cultural Museum exposition on Mexico. And we wanted to have a special activity regarding the 8th of March. So what we did was to organize 2 webinars. The first one is this one, in which different women organizations in Mexico are going to speak about the situation as they see it in Mexico, their activities, their strategies in this struggle for gender equality, but also struggle against violence and many other related struggles for the feminist movement in Mexico. So you are very welcome to this. And today we start with 3 different organizations. One regarding gender equality in general, the other one with the struggle for the decriminalization of abortion, and the third one is women rural organizations. And we are going to have the voice of all these 3 organizations regarding what is happening in Mexico, as I said before. The next webinar, which is taking place on the 9th on Wednesday, is going to continue with the discussion from other organizations and other perspectives. And there, as perhaps you know from the activities of the museum, we are going to have a special workshop as well on embroidery for to make attention to feminicides. And this is where one of the organizations in the north border of Mexico who's working with this kind of embroidery. So we are inviting you to this workshop and then to attend the second webinar on the struggle of Mexican women for their rights. So now I'm going to give the word to Rebeca Lorea. And she's going to speak in English, so there's no problem. But then when we come to Gadi, I'm going to make the translation. So very welcome, Rebecca, and please tell us about yourself, your organization, and your strategies.
Thank you very much, Edme. I am really happy to be here with you and to be with Maria Eugenia and Gadi, because we are partners in the fight for decriminalization of abortion, as well as other fights for gender equality. I work in the information group on reproductive choice, which is GIRE in Spanish. We are a feminist human rights organization that was founded 30 years ago with the main purpose to advance on the decriminalization of abortion by researching and having the latest and better data on abortion and how the criminalization of abortion impacts women and girls and adolescents in Mexico. And for the last 11 years in GIRE, we've been working also other reproductive rights issues, such as the maternal mortality issues and the fight against obstetric violence, the regulation of assisted reproductive techniques, and the life-work balance, and to have these public policies that allow us women in Mexico to have this life and work balance. We have a team of almost 30 people. We're almost all women, and we have we are a lot of lawyers in GIRE, because we also have the litigation team, which accompanies women and litigate cases in front of the Supreme Court, some of them, but not all of them, and to search and go with women in their search for justice when they are denied an abortion or when they are victims of obstetric violence, or their families when they are victims of maternal mortality. So that's what HIRE works for in Mexico. And we are, I have to say that we are like a sister organization with Equidad, where Maria Eugenia is the executive director. So all these struggles and all these fights are always in collaboration with Equidad and with other organizations. And it's really nice to work together. And about the decriminalization of abortion and the fight of decriminalization of abortion, I would like to say, to start with saying that it's been, as I would imagine in the whole world, a fight for decades. And it has only been in the last 15 years where we can see some of advance in our laws towards the decriminalization of abortion. In Mexico, abortion, it is still, as a general rule, a crime. And it is not only a crime when performed after rape in the whole country. And we have 32 states, and each state regulates abortion differently. In all states, it is in their criminal laws and in their criminal codes. But each state changes the circumstances in which abortion, it is not a crime. The only circumstance that it is legal in the whole country is abortion after rape. But in the other states, it might change. For example, we have a very conservative state in the center of Mexico, which is Guanajuato, and where abortion, it is only legal when performed after rape or when the life of the women is at risk. Then we have other criminal codes, such as the Yucatan Code, which have 7 circumstances in which abortion, it is not a crime, such as social economic circumstances and rape and the risk for the health of women and the risk for the life. And when it is involved some artificial reproductive techniques performed without consent of the women. And I'm mentioning these 2 states as an example of how much or less rights women have in Mexico, how much or less reproductive rights we have in Mexico, depending on our place of residence or on our social and economic power and ability to move from a state to another state to have a legal abortion. This has changed a little bit recently after a Supreme Court's ruling. And I just wanted to make like a little storytelling on the advance of these last 15 years, which is like a tiny advance in paper, but I think that it has been a great advance in terms of social movement and the social decriminalization of abortion. So everything started in 2007 when abortion was first decriminalized when performed in the first 12 weeks of gestation in Mexico City. This was the first state, and if Maru, if there's something that I'm saying it wrong, because Maru was one of the main activists involved in this fight and in this decriminalization, but I think Mexico City was the first place and the first territory in whole Latin America that decriminalized abortion when performing the first 12 weeks of gestation and the 12 weeks of pregnancy. And it was groundbreaking for the country and for the continent, because not only because the reform and the change in the criminal code, but also because it stated a public policy in Mexico City for perform abortion. So in Mexico City, we have since 2007 public services that offer the service of abortion. And it has been a very, like an oasis and a place for all women and girls and adolescents in Mexico that during the last 15 years, lots of women have come to Mexico City to have a safe and legal abortion, because for 12 years was the only state where you could do that in public services and without the fear of being criminalized. Then it came in 2019, or 12 years later, which was a little late, but not that late, because we still have other states that haven't decriminalized abortion at all. But then came in 2019, Oaxaca, which was the second state to decriminalize abortion within the first trimester of pregnancy. And it was also groundbreaking because Oaxaca is a southeast state with lots of needs in terms of reproductive rights. And this has to do mostly, I mean, we in here have like this analysis on how from Mexico City to Oaxaca had passed 12 years, but then after Oaxaca came lots of movements on lots of states that have decriminalized abortion. And we think it's because the green tide social movement, that it is identified with these green scarves, such as the one Edme has in the back of the place where she is. It is a social movement that started in Argentina for the fight for fighting for the decriminalization of abortion, and in 2018 was the first time where they were just this close to decriminalize abortion in the 14 weeks of pregnancy. And although it didn't happen, they send all this energy and all this like identification of a social movement to the whole Latin America. So the green tide came to Mexico, and lots of people and lots of, I mean, there has always been, or for decades, there has been people and mainly women that fight for the criminalization of abortion. But I think that from the green tide movement, this came like socially more accepted, or like very, it is very important to fill the streets and to have this symbolic scarf that makes us a part of the social movement. And in 2018, there was the biggest elections in Mexico that have passed. And after that elections and the green tide movement came Oaxaca in 2019. And we in INGIRE, for example, we monitor all bills for the criminalization of abortion in Mexico. And before 2018, we had only knowledge of maybe 1 or 3 bills in different parts of Mexico that search for the criminalization of abortion. But after the 2018 elections and the green tide movement, we now have lots of bills. We from 2018 to 2021 monitored almost 100 bills for the criminalization of abortion throughout Mexico. And it is very representative of how the social movement and the social decriminalization of abortion have pushed this conversation and push these legislative branches to present on and to have this interest in decriminalizing abortion. So after 2019, that came Oaxaca, we had in the last year, in almost 3 years, from 2007 to 2019, from Mexico City to Oaxaca, but then from Oaxaca in 2019 to 2021, it passed only 3 years. And in 2021, last year, 4 states decriminalized abortion in these first 12 weeks of pregnancy. So we think it is like mind-blowing to have waited from 12 years from one first state to the second state, and then only in a period of 6 months to have 4 states that decriminalized abortion in this first trimester. The first state was, the first state, but first state in 2021 was Hidalgo. And then only like a couple of weeks later came Veracruz. And then in October came Baja California, and in December, Colima. When all this was happening, it came also the Supreme Court's ruling, 3 Supreme Court's ruling that were also groundbreaking for whole Latin America. I would say that this Mexico Supreme Court ruling even inspired the Colombian Supreme Court ruling, the recent ruling on decriminalization of abortion until the up to the 24th week of pregnancy, because in September, the Mexico Supreme Court stated that criminalizing abortion, it is unconstitutional, that there has to be a period within the first trimester or second trimester, but there has to be a period during pregnancy where women and adolescents and people who can get pregnant have to have the right to choose whether or not to abort or to take that pregnancy to the end and to birth. When the Supreme Court states this, automatically all the judges and all the judiciary in Mexico is not allowed to start any judgment against the women that have gone through abortion, or any person who has gone and helped women to perform an abortion. And it is really nice because it is like a decriminalization on like a factual decriminalization, even though also all the legislative branches in all the other states still have to do their work and still have to reform their criminal codes in order to decriminalize abortion, at least within these first 12 weeks of pregnancy. But these 12 weeks are like a minimum. They're not a maximum, and they're not the only weeks that have to be legal. It is only a minimum. So we are hoping for other states to go a little further and to know that there are lots of circumstances in which women need abortions after these first 12 weeks of gestation, and not necessarily when it is an abortion after rape, but also when it can be abortions in any circumstances, because women's lives are so diverse and women's experiences are so diverse that it is still like a little crazy to expect to a criminal code to have these specific circumstances and circumstances in which women can exercise their rights or not. We are now hoping for other states to decriminalize abortion. There are bills in Guerrero, which is the state where Gadi lives. Maybe she knows a little bit more about how this process is going to end, and if we can say that Guerrero will be the 8th state to decriminalize abortion. But there are also efforts in the state of Puebla, in the state of Sinaloa, in Quintana Roo, and we're hoping to see lots of movement. And to in the March 8th, it is the abortion and the fight for decriminalization of abortion. It is always important to remember that even though we have these 6 states now that recognize our rights, and even though we have the Supreme Court's ruling, there are still left 26 states that have to do their work and decriminalize abortion. And in those states where abortion have been already decriminalized, that the executive branch and the Minister of Health have to perform the abortion and to make and to move all their public policies and their resources to actually allow women to go and ask for abortions and to have this health service as a right. I don't know if I already spent my 15 minutes, but I can also wait for the discussion later and for questions.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Yes, we will have several discussions afterwards, so don't worry you forgot anything. Now we are going to Maria Eugenia Romero, who is going to speak about the general situation regarding gender equality in Mexico. Please, Maria Eugenia.
Thank you very much, Edme. Thanks, everybody. And also thanks to the World Culture Museum in Sweden. I'm very glad to be here with you and with my colleagues, Gadi and Rebecca. And now that I was listening to Rebecca, when we talk about advances and challenges in Mexico, and you are my age, you can be very positive because we have reached a lot of achievements from what we thought were dreams many, many years ago. There are many things that we have to also work on. There's a long path still we haven't gone through, but there are many things that we have reached, and that really makes me very happy. Well, Mexico, if you would please put my presentation there. In Mexico, there are many, many challenges. Mexico is like, it's a big country that can be like, that could embrace like many small countries. And next, please. Well, I am Maria Eugenia Romero from Gender Equity, Citizenship, Work, Labor, and Family in Mexico City. And we have been working on different issues for over 25 years. So next, please, Sydney. Well, Mexico is not very different as well, like from many other countries in Latin America that are facing many inequalities and that have been deepened due to the pandemic. It's been more evident the existence of discrimination towards women because the existing discrimination became like more evident and more severe. According to the ECLAC, next please, Sydney. According to the ECLAC, the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, all the women's rights in the region have suffered a setback of 10 years. This has very serious implications because, as I said, we have had advances in many cases, and now with this is back, that has to do, for example, mainly with employment. There was like only 45% of women in Latin America that had an employment before the pandemic, 45%, different from like 85% of men, something like that. So we cannot reach gender equality if women don't have access to a job and to have their own money. Edme, can you please put next slide? Can you hear me? Well, now there is one other thing that we have to emphasize. No advance on gender equality can be made if the structural inequalities between women and men related to the unequal distribution of domestic care and unpaid work are not addressed. We firmly believe that this unequal distribution of this work really affects the time that women can allocate for studying, for their personal and professional development, and even for their own entertainment. So, well, now I would like to mention like 3 basic structural areas to analyze the advancements and challenges for gender equality. These areas are gender budgeting, then the economic condition of women during the COVID pandemic, and women's visibility in the climate change agenda. I'm not seeing the change in the slides, Sydney. Can you please tell me if everybody else you can see the changes, or maybe you can take it down if you cannot work with it.
I am still seeing the first one.
Do you see only the first one?
Yeah.
So let me, that's a problem that we have with this. Let me go back to share the screen and then let me see. You see this?
Yes.
Okay.
The first slide.
I cannot put the whole in the showing the whole thing because then you will not go from one to the other. That's
okay. Can you click like number 4 then?
Yes. Here.
Thank you. Okay. Well, gender budgeting, what is this? Gender budgeting, we have always said that is one of the main strategic lines when advocating for gender public policies and budget, is to promote that all states' interventions place at the center unpaid domestic and care work and conscientiously avoiding to create additional work burdens for women avoiding normalizing women's unpaid work, and being fully aware that women's rights have to be respected in all program actions implemented. When we went to Beijing for the conference, International Conference of Women, we realized that we had to also think or advocate in the case of the resources and money, because if we only had programs that have no economic support, they do not simply give the benefits they are made for. Next, please. Then we have had like three main achievements in legal achievements in the feminist movement regarding gender budgeting. We started in the year 2000 to analyze the Mexican federal budget for the first time. And we checked all the programs that had even a mention about a woman or women or girls. We realized that only 0.03% of all the programs had a reference to women. Only that, and it means nothing. And then we worked with the legislators for a long time, and we finally got to develop the Annex 13. This Annex 13 includes all the programs related to that are intended to reduce the inequality gaps between men and women. Well, and that's a list. I will mention that later also. Well, in the year this year now, the cost of the programs in this annex accounted to 3.7% of the national budget. That means that only 3.7% of this national budget works supposedly towards gender equality, and that 96.3% of the total budget not only does not include gender, but it emphasizes gender inequalities. Next, please. We have here, for example, that according to a study that we carried out 2 years ago, that was about monitoring the budget for equality between women and men and the right to a life free of violence. We published that in 2020 and we updated it. This was a 6-year analysis in 2020. We can see that there was an increase of more than 60% in 2018 and 2022 in the monetary resources allocated to gender policies. However, this doesn't mean that the resources are being better distributed or that have a positive impact in the equality of women. This means that they have put more money in that bag, and I believe it's true and it's good, but it's not enough because many of the programs that are included there do not have a gender policy inside. They were not developed in order to reduce the gender gap. They mainly refer to the priority programs that this administration is fostering, like giving scholarships to young people or support for older adults or reforestation. They even say that the government has said that this helps women's rights and reduces gender inequalities because most of the beneficiaries are women. But that doesn't mean they are really they are addressing gender inequalities. So in this case, the 3.7% of the federal budget that is in this annex is not totally related to reduce gender inequalities. Next, please. On the other hand, it's like we say gender budgeting, many people still think that it only has to do with women. They don't have diagnosis for the policies before they start their policies or those programs. It's very difficult now. Still, people don't understand that in the legislation and programs and budgets and at all levels, they have to include gender view. because if they don't, they are creating discriminatory schemes. And well, we need very clear criteria in order to analyze which programs can really be put in this Annex 13 that are heading to reducing gender gaps. And if not, they shouldn't be there. That has been a long fight we have had with several administrations, because they want to feel that they put a lot of money for women, which is not a lot anyway, and that they include whatever programs they feel that have a lot of money, and they think, we believe they're working on gender equality, and they're not. Next, please. What should the government instead invest in? That we have been working also on like providing women the abilities or the conditions for them to go to work or to study. And for that, we need that the government invest in daycare centers, basically. They also should, is that it? Oh, okay, yes, yeah, that's right. In daycare centers, and also in areas or schools or clinics for older adults, for people with disabilities and with several illnesses. And also we had before, but until about a month ago, I guess, some schools with extended time lapse for elementary school. Like here, schools open from 8 in the morning to 12:30. Elementary schools, public elementary schools, and these other ones had an extended time that was like from 8 to 4, which allowed women to go to work, to have a job, and they were just eliminated because it's not a priority of the government. So that is really terrible setback. The government should be investing in that. And also the economic autonomy of women. We know, we have heard that it's very important that women participate in the economic life of the country, because it is their participation can really help the country grow, but some people still don't understand that. Anyway, and finally, in this case, I would say that we have this national equality program. Yeah, national equality program from the National Institute of Women, but this program that includes a lot of issues that are important for women have not a corresponding link to the federal budget. So it's a good idea, but in fact, in reality, it's not linked to the real money. Next, please. And now about, oh God. I'm running out of time, I think. Well, okay, quickly, the COVID pandemic, and out of 6 out of 10 women and employed women are in the weak sectors due to the pandemic: trade, tourism, housework, entertainment, and so on. 30% are in the informal sector, and 29.4% of women do not have their own income. They don't have their own income, or they don't have their own money. But basically also with, next please. Well, then 21% of women had the probability of doing home office, but since we have several problems with technology, this is reduced to only 15%. And maybe I should just go to the next one, please. And because I'm running out of time, I say that this is important because with the COVID crisis, women declared to have a greater burden of care work than men. That responded that women born in 24 of women said they had a greater burden of care work, and men less than 20. And although men also stayed at home with doing housework, home office, and being in the surrounding with their children, their family, and all the housework around them. A friend that works in the government told me that she heard that nothing has changed in the relationship of men participation in housework or taking care of children. And that is really a very bad news, because then if it was so evident how difficult it is to do that when men were not participating, at least from what she heard or she saw, then we are in trouble, and we'll see what we can do about it. And well, there you have other data of women that were affected in different ways because of their had to devote their time to child caring or child schooling, house schooling, and all that because of the pandemic. I think I will stop there, and maybe because then we can also have more comments during the questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, we are coming back to all this when we go to the discussion. Ahora le quiero dar la bienvenida a Gadi Aleli, que viene de un estado con muchos problemas, creo yo, en el sur de México, el estado de Guerrero. I want to welcome Gadi Aleli, who comes from a very delicate state in Mexico, in the southern part of the country, that has many, many social problems, and she's going to speak to us about the situation there regarding women. Bienvenida, Gadi. I'm going to make the translation.
Muchas gracias, Edme, compañeras que están acompañándonos en esta actividad. Pues es un gusto para mí que hayan podido invitarme para esta presentación, porque creo que es importante visibilizar la situación de las mujeres desde la parte y el medio rural. Ya al finalizar María Eugenia en su presentación hablaba un poco de esta situación, que es muy diferente a la situación de las mujeres en la ciudad.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and given what I have seen from these presentations, I think that mine will complement, because it's somehow different, the situation from the cities, from the urban context to the rural ones.
Voy a empezar a presentar.
Sí.
Edme, håll mikrofonen närmare lite. Tack.
Okay.
¿Ya se visibiliza?
Sí.
De acuerdo. El tema que voy a compartir con ustedes es sobre la situación de las mujeres en el mundo rural en uno de los estados más violentos del país, que es el estado de Guerrero.
So what I'm going to speak about is the situation of women in the rural context in one of the most violent states in Mexico, which is Guerrero.
Para sintetizar este caso, o como ejemplificar un poco la situación, voy a enfocarme específicamente al trabajo que realiza una organización de esta zona. Es una organización de mujeres indígenas que se llama Situationen.
I'm going to focus especially in the work carried out by one organization working in this state. It's an indigenous women organization.
El antecedente de trabajo de esta organización, que se llama Situationen, inició en 1994. Esta organización se ubica en Chilapa de Álvarez, Guerrero, México, y Chilapa es conocido como uno de los municipios más violentos del estado en la actualidad. Situationen significa mujer luciérnaga, es de náhuatl, es traducido del náhuatl al español.
So this organization that is called Siwame So Klametsin started in 1994, and it's working in a place that's called Chilapa de Álvarez in Guerrero, and translation of this name, Siwame Jotlametzin, means women light. It's an insect which has a lot of light. I don't remember the word in English. I don't know if any of you know that it flies and has a lot of light.
Es correcto. Su actividad principal era organizar grupos de mujeres en las comunidades para posteriormente fortalecer su empoderamiento económico a través de proyectos productivos, y posteriormente empezó a desarrollar trabajos sociales donde incluyó temas de derechos humanos de las mujeres.
So the main activity of this organization was to try to organize women in different indigenous communities and to try to strengthen their empowerment, economic empowerment through different productive projects. Afterwards, they started with social projects, which included the theme of human rights for women.
En el año 2000 empezó a hacer incidencia política con otras redes de organizaciones. Aquí la estrategia era crear redes y vínculos con otras organizaciones y colectivas para visibilizar una problemática y enfocarse en la incidencia sobre ello.
So in the year 2000, they started to make also political work with other organizations and other networks. And it went up in these incidents, in this work, up to 2004, when they started to establish relations with international organizations.
Sí. Bueno, en el año 2004 aproximadamente es cuando tiene un auge importante y empieza a entablar relaciones con organizaciones internacionales. Ahora les voy a compartir algunas imágenes desde que se inició el trabajo de esta organización, que es 1994, hasta la fecha sigue activa, pero bueno, estas solamente son unas imágenes que les comparto de su trabajo.
And all these photos, all this is just to illustrate the work of this organization since 1994.
En el año 2010 aproximadamente es cuando la situación de la organización empieza a cambiar, pero todo es consecuencia del nuevo contexto político que se estaba viviendo y el contexto social que también se empezaba a visibilizar en el Estado, que pues prácticamente incluía aspectos de redes y grupos del crimen organizado.
Mm-hmm. In the year 2010, the situation of this organization started to change because of the new context in the state, and that means the increased activity of organized crime.
Por esta razón, la participación de las mujeres dentro de esta organización empieza a disminuir, y ahorita les especifico como cuáles son unas de las situaciones que contribuyeron para eso.
And as a result of this, the activities of these women started to decrease.
Una de ellas, bueno, las consecuencias que tuvieron a partir de ello fue que la violencia a causa del crimen organizado impidió que las mujeres y hombres se puedan desplazar desde sus comunidades a buscar fuentes de empleo en otros espacios.
One of the consequences of this situation was that because of violence, of this organized crime, women and men had difficulties to go out of their communities to look for employment.
Posteriormente, las mujeres que formaban parte de la organización ya no podían seguir participando porque sus esposos o sus hijos fueron parte ya o miembros de los grupos comunitarios para la defensa de sus tierras dentro de sus comunidades.
And the other situation is that for these women that were part of the organization, they couldn't continue participating because their husbands or their children became members of these communitary groups that organize themselves to defend their land.
Otra situación fue que la organización ya no se podía desplazar a muchas de las comunidades donde tenía influencia con los grupos de mujeres, y esto se debía precisamente para salvaguardar la vida de sus integrantes, así como su propia integridad. Por lo tanto, la organización dejó de desplazarse a las comunidades y se centró solamente en trabajar en la cabecera municipal de Chilapa.
And also the organization could not go and visit the different communities where they had previously had some influence among women groups because of the situation of security for themselves and the security of the women themselves in these communities.
Otra de las consecuencias de este contexto es que muchas mujeres de las comunidades, sobre todo las jóvenes, que eran parte de esta organización, quedaron viudas y al menos con un hijo y tenían que mantenerlo, así que tuvieron que emigrar a otros estados en busca de trabajo y dejaron obviamente de organizarse dentro de sus comunidades.
Also, as a result of this, many of these young women in the communities they lost their husband and they had to take charge of their children, at least one children. And so they had to migrate to leave the communities and move to other states in the country to look for jobs.
Y podría comentar que otra de las consecuencias que tiene vivir en un contexto completamente violento, como es Chilapa, es que al menos para las organizaciones de mujeres, las mismas fuentes financiadoras se han retirado de estas zonas porque creen que desarrollar proyectos en estos espacios es complicado para lograr los objetivos que se plantean. Y aquí les comparto dos casos específicos que Siwame presenció y que pues obviamente ya no tuvo la facilidad de estos apoyos a causa del tema de la inseguridad en el estado, pero específicamente en Chilapa.
And another consequence of this violent situation was that some of the people who were doing, who were financing the organizations that were financing these projects, decided not to continue this financing because of the situation of insecurity. And here are two cases, 2013 and 2015, where different foundations, for example, an American foundation, of a project that was already approved, and people who were funding this were going to come to visit. But then there was the discovery of a place of mass grave, and then the donors decided to cancel the approval of this project. In 2015, this Spanish foundation heard that in the news, this municipality of Chilapa, it was becoming very violent, and they also decided to cancel the approval of the project. Ya les expliqué estos dos casos.
Sí, sí, sí. Gracias. Pues es lo que podría compartir con ustedes por el momento. Solamente quisiera recalcar que hoy más que nunca creo que es fundamental permanecer organizadas dentro, sobre todo de estos espacios que son considerados espacios zona roja, que así les llaman aquí, y pues creo que vale la pena hacer un análisis y una reflexión un poco más a fondo de ello. Gracias.
And that's what I wanted to share with you, because I think that given the situation, one has to reflect more on what is happening, but also to try to help to continue with these projects. And she thanks you for this. And now we are going to continue with the discussion. We are going to open for questions, for comments, so we can so our participants can answer and perhaps deepen themselves in what they were exposing. So we have one question here. Why do you think Guerrero specifically carry more violence than other states? What is the reason for it? Tenemos una pregunta aquí en el chat que dice, ¿por qué crees que hay tanta violencia en Guerrero más que en otros estados? ¿Cuál es la razón de eso?
De acuerdo a los análisis que hacen los mismos medios de comunicación, se cree que son cuestiones políticas aquí. Entonces, eso ya política partidista, entonces por lo tanto creo que por eso todavía no puede haber una reglamentación o algo que pueda disminuir esta situación. Ya llevamos años así y hasta la vez ningún gobierno nuevo o de los gobiernos que llegan han podido pues combatir de alguna forma estos casos o esta situación que se vive en el Estado.
Gadi says that according to some political analysts, some experts say that the fact that they have so much violence is also a political issue because the governments that have come to the state have not been able to control this violence because of political reasons. And so there have been several years that have passed by and nothing has been done on that. Te pone muchas gracias, Gadi, por la respuesta. Now we have, as I said before, open the floor to ask the other participants as well. Do you have any kind of question, of comment? Among the public, we open for that. Is there anybody that wants to raise a question? Because I have myself several questions, but I give the priority to the public. Mientras esperamos que venga alguna otra pregunta, yo sí tengo algunas preguntas y yo quisiera abundar en que María Eugenia abundara un poco más en lo que no alcanzó a exponer sobre la situación general y todo esto que está pasando en México en general. Nos hablaste de la situación presupuestal y la falta de políticas realmente ligadas a los presupuestos para disminuir la desigualdad de género, pero como que se te quedaron muchas cosas en el tintero. Yo quería que hablaras un poco más sobre eso. So I'm asking María Eugenia to expose what she had no time to expose during her presentation.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. As well, as Gadi was saying, I was beginning to address the issue of indigenous women in Mexico and those women that live in rural and marginal urban zones. That they are the ones that work the most, and they are the ones that are the first ones in leave the labor force, because in that crisis, they are the ones who have to take care of children and do unpaid work. So they're really vulnerable in their economic situation. And this is not a Mexican issue only. It happens in many places. And then this becomes something as that the indigenous women are subsidizing the global economy. And then we have to think of radical changes for their participation in their climate change agenda in order to understand that they are active actors of the development, to really include them, not only as beneficiaries of certain gender climate change policies that have to do with adaptation. And we see many times that women are linked in these rural areas to the climate change agenda only in adapting themselves and to the situation of the climate change. And we don't think that is, I mean, that we know it's a step, and I think adaptation should be done, but should not only be the burden on women, but also men's participation. But we also have to work on the mitigation aspect of climate change. That is more important. And women are not seen there. Women are not considered as active actors in the mitigation process, because this process has to do with more with techniques, the industry, infrastructure, and all that. And so women are seen only as consumers of technology, consumers of resources, but not the ones that have the ability to make and participate in these changes. So it is important that with this climate change agenda, also we push for the transition to the energetic transition and decarbonization of the economies. But in that field, we have also taken into account that the employments, that the jobs that are created have also social protection that are also considering that the fact that we have unpaid work that has to be done and that can be balanced, and all these jobs also, when they call them green jobs and all that, they are not taking this into account. So we have to force this situation so that all jobs provide social security, all jobs have logical schedules, all jobs consider this child raising, and either if these jobs are formal or informal, and that also these jobs and anything on any job also considers that women's violence against women is an issue that has to be addressed and has to be reduced. And it's the responsibility of the state also to provide a system for child caring or for adult care, and several countries in Latin America are working on that. It is very difficult. It is really a very important issue in our societies that has been neglected, at least in Latin America. We have daycare centers for babies, like in some areas, but not in other areas. They have certain quality, they have terrible quality, some others. We don't have a protocol, or we don't have a ruling to really have daycare centers for adults, so for older adults or for people with disabilities. And this is a big country with 120 million people. So it's very big, and it's going to be very difficult to really create this care national system. But it's a must that the government has to provide that, and we have to work on it so that they recognize that women have to do a lot of unpaid work, and it's the responsibility of the society and the state and the government. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have another one. This might be a broad question, but how can we help women in Mexico from Sweden? Un comentario, una pregunta, Gary, también es cómo se puede ayudar a las mujeres en México a partir de Suecia. Esa es una pregunta. Y la otra es, ¿qué impacto tiene la administración de AMLO sobre los derechos reproductivos de las mujeres? ¿Qué estrategias se pueden implementar para contrarrestar la decisión gubernamental de cerrar las escuelas de tiempo completo? ¿Qué apoyos podrían proveer el gobierno para las mujeres de Guerrero? So, to answer these questions, perhaps we start with Rebeca, and then you all have the opportunity to do this.
Yes. On the first question on how can people who are watching this help women in Mexico from Sweden, I don't have like a concrete answer, but I can think by echoing our voices, the voices of the organizations that we are here, as well as other organizations that work for women's rights in Mexico. We have, I think all of the organizations have the opportunity to receive also money and other kind of economic support to keep working, such as donativos, como the nations, claro. So that might be a good way. And on the question of the impact of López Obrador administration over women's reproductive rights, I think it is a tricky answer because the figure of the president discourse on reproductive rights is one, and the work on reproductive rights of the whole administration is another. And I think it is easier to get to the president's discourse and the president's words, which are not in favor of our rights. The president has always been like ambiguous on its opinion on abortion, specifically by saying that he doesn't have an opinion, or that abortion has to be put into public, like a public consultancy, and to hear what the majority of people have to say on the decriminalization of abortion. But at the same time, the president's administration, specifically the Ministry of Health and the Sexual and Reproductive Rights Center of the Ministry of Health, has done a lot of work towards reproductive rights. And it is really hard to explain how the executive chief and the president has this discourse by always not having a right opinion over reproductive rights movement and over feminist movement as a whole. Today on its morning conference, he also spoke really bad things on the feminist movement, and it's not the first time that he does so. Each March 8th, he has said very terrible things on the feminist movement, and even said that the feminist movement started 3 years ago. His administration started because the feminist movement is a conservative movement, and it is really sad, and it is I get really angry when I hear what the president says about the feminist movement and the reproductive rights movement. But at the same time, his administration, through like this Sexual and Reproductive Rights Center, has done important things. One of them is the publication of the Sexual and Reproductive Rights National Program, which for the first time in the history has a priority objective on the advancement of access to abortion. And maybe we had other administrations, the past administrations, where the presidents didn't say bad things about the feminist movement, but they also didn't have any specific work towards reproductive rights. And then we have this specific situation where the president is not a friend of the feminist movement, but the people who work with him, they are. So yes, and I will also have to say that within these 4 states that decriminalized abortion in the last year, these are states where Morena, which is the president's party, Morena is a majority. And it has been like a key strategy to know where Morena has a majority on the legislative branch, to know that those are the places where the decriminalization of abortion has opportunity to advance, even though the president is not in favor of abortion. So it is a really confusing context. But I think we would have to acknowledge that women within the Morena party and other people within the administration have been allies of the reproductive rights movement.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Gadi, please, and then I will give the word to María Eugenia. Gadi, ¿puedes contestar estas preguntas?
Sí. Pues cuando se habla sobre los derechos reproductivos de las mujeres indígenas específicamente, esta organización que yo les presenté aperturó una casa de la mujer indígena, y esta casa se especializa en la atención sobre los derechos sexuales y reproductivos de las mujeres, específicamente la partería tradicional. Entonces,
when I spoke about the organization, I told you about they had a special house that focused on sexual and reproductive rights.
Sí, Entonces, en esta administración precisamente del presidente se hace un recorte importante para las organizaciones sociales y específicamente para las casas que atienden a las mujeres indígenas. Entonces, de alguna forma sí afectan estas nuevas formas de propuestas de gobierno.
¿Puedes decir otra, o sea, qué ha hecho esta administración de López Obrador? ¿Los ha favorecido a esas casas?
No, al contrario, recortó presupuesto.
Recortó. Okay, so this presidential administration has not been very good for these projects because they have cut down the budget of these programs.
Y podría hacer una última opinión sobre la última pregunta.
Sí.
Sobre qué apoyos podrían prever el gobierno para las mujeres de Guerrero. Yo creo que ahí es importante hacer un verdadero ejercicio de la gobernanza, porque de lo contrario, pues no se puede trabajar entre instituciones y organizaciones, siguen habiendo una brecha. Aunque la Secretaría de la Mujer en el Estado hace o intenta hacer acciones de integración, todavía hace falta que las instituciones realmente asuman su papel como instituciones y puedan garantizar los derechos de las mujeres respecto a temas diversos.
So this is a challenge. She's speaking about the situation in Guerrero. This is a challenge for the kind of governance that we see, because on the one hand, we see the agency regarding women's rights trying to do some kind of work, but the institutions are not helping this work. They are sometimes against this kind of work. So it's not advancing. It's very contradictory. What we see. También está la pregunta de qué se puede hacer desde Suecia para ayudar a las mujeres en México. Gadi.
No la encontré aquí, pero bueno, yo creo que como les decía, aquí la estrategia es crear redes y crear articulaciones con organizaciones locales, estatales, nacionales. De alguna forma, esta organización ha tenido buena relación con la organización de María Eugenia, precisamente Equidad ha sido una aliada importante para el proceso de esta organización de Sihuame, pero yo creo que hace falta también primero visibilizar, que ustedes puedan conocer cuál es el contexto y la situación de las organizaciones específicamente en estas zonas y hacer precisamente esos enlaces para ver de qué forma se puede incidir.
So Gladys is speaking about the first question that her organizations have been trying to articulate some kind of network with different regional, national organizations. She mentioned the organization of María Eugenia, Equidad de Género, that has worked with them. And the work that should be done is to make the situation in Guerrero and the situation of these women organizations more visible and to create this articulation at the international level. Gracias, Gadi. María Eugenia.
And maybe in that same sense of what can the people from Sweden do for women in Mexico, I would suggest that you buy the handcrafts that are made by the indigenous women. That would help them a lot. Now they are selling through the digital market and you can find many things. Maybe Gadi can tell us where. And this I'm wearing is from Chiapas, for example, and they make beautiful things. And I think technology can help very much to make get our people closer one to another. And regarding these schools with long period of time of schooling, I don't know what can be done, but the president is absolutely convinced that he's right when giving money directly to the people, not through any institution, not through any whatever, just directly to the people. So he decided that the schools had to be reconstructed, or they had to be built well, because in Mexico, in many schools, well, you don't have a roof, you don't have bathrooms, you don't have a good school area, right? So when he decided that he was going to change that, he said that the community of mothers and fathers were going to receive the money, and they would decide if they would make more rooms or bathrooms or put up the roof or whatever. They would do that. And this morning when he was asked about this in schools, and he said, the parents have their money. They know what to do. If they want to make them for longer hours, they will do it themselves. But they cannot pay the teachers. They are not the ones that have a responsibility. They are not the ones that know the quality of what the schools must have and everything. But there's no way to take him out of there. That's like, no, impossible. Nobody can do anything about it. But what we can do, or what has been happening spontaneously, Mexico City said they were going to maintain with their own resources these schools, as well as another state. I don't remember which one. I don't remember which one, but they said, we believe that is important for society, so we're going to maintain these schools. And then let's hope that this happens. And of course, this system is not the best, or it's not perfect. Everything in Mexico lacks something. Nothing is perfect, but it was a great help for women. So let's try to keep them and also improve them, because they need some changes. But who can work if you have to take your child to school at 8 in the morning and come back and pair him up at 12:30 in the afternoon?
Okay, we have some minutes left. If anybody among the public wants to raise another question, I myself, I would like to deepen also in this contradiction that Rebeca Lorea mentioned. On the one hand, this discourse from the president that is very conservative, it's very stubborn upon certain ideas. And on the other hand, people working in different areas and perhaps also linked to Morena, to the party, that are really doing some things that make changes. So how do you see the perspective of a general advancement of gender equity in Mexico in this situation? Do you think that I think it was Marigenia who mentioned we have attained a lot of things. We have changed things that we in our youth didn't dream that could be changed. And I know that, I'm also from Mexico, but what is the strategy of the feminist movements to do more changes? What can be achieved in the short run, in the middle run, when we are already seeing that there are a lot of challenges and we have contradictory discourses coming from above? So how do you see the situation? And I'm going to translate that for Gadi as well. Digo que hay una contradicción entre un gobierno que por un lado el discurso es muy conservador de López Obrador, por otro lado hay agencias que han trabajado bien, como lo mencionó Rebeca Lorea, y que se ha conseguido bastante, pero que todavía hay muchos retos que conseguir. ¿Cuál es, cómo ven la situación, cómo avanzar, cuáles son las estrategias a corto y a mediano plazo en todo esto? So please, any one of you.
Okay, I'll start. I think that, well, there are many different feminist movements in Mexico, and I think we have like different issues that we discuss and the different ways we work on them. But I think it's a very, very big movement. We saw it 2 years ago, the march on March 8th, 2 years ago. It was 1 million women there only in Mexico City. It was so crowded. I mean, you couldn't walk through. It was really very, very important. And I'm very optimistic. I think I'm optimistic also because, as I said, 20, 30 years ago, this was impossible not to think about. There are feminist women everywhere. I mean, in all the institutions, in all the government agencies, in all the parties, in the congresses, like we're everywhere. So we have always worked hard for what we have wanted, but I think there are many opportunities, and we have convinced also many men that we are fighting for something that is fair, that is right, and that is helpful for the society. And in my case, I just don't think much about the president, because as Rebeca said, he lets people do their stuff, and we have very prepared people, women and men in different positions, important positions, and they go with it, and they have been defending women's rights. And we must be more pay attention to the conservative people. That's a problem. That is the main issue, because they don't want anything to change. They want to go back to the Middle Age. And that is a problem. They're violent, and they are aggressive, and they're well organized, and they have a lot of money. So, but I think having this leftist government and so many people very actively, and I think there's a lot of discussion every day because of these many things, but mainly because of the press conference the president gives every morning for about 2 hours. People think about it, they talk about themes, they analyze. People are really reasoning, thinking, debating, and I think that's important for the society, for citizenship.
Rebeca and Gadi, what do you think?
Yo sigo pensando que la mejor estrategia es seguir trabajando y fortaleciendo las redes y las articulaciones que hemos logrado. Eso no tiene que disminuir, al contrario, tiene que crecer, porque de otra forma no se puede seguir. Bueno, en este caso, en el caso que yo les compartí, no se puede crecer sola y no se puede avanzar sola. Entonces, para mí esa es la única estrategia.
So for me, the main strategy is to try to grow and to develop all our networks and articulations with other organizations. And for me, this is the main strategy, because we cannot advance alone. ¿Algo más?
No, I totally agree with Gadi and Maria Eugenia. I think the feminist movement in Mexico is really diverse, but it's also really strong, and it is present in a whole country, not only in Mexico City. Sometimes the media and even ourselves, sometimes as organizations, focus only on what happens in Mexico City, but actually there is a lot of women working for our throughout the whole country. I was just in Mexicali this weekend, and I could see how there are women working in really adverse contexts, where there are groups of anti-rights movements, so-called pro-life. And even though they are working together, and they need to be also supported and by these other national or bigger organizations. So I think, yes, it is really important to stay together and to remind ourselves that there are lots of feminist movements, diverse feminist movements in the whole country, and we are working in different contexts, but we are working towards the same objective and the same goal, which is the equality and freedom of women. And we'll see tomorrow, hopefully, all these demonstrations in the whole country, not only in Mexico City, and we will keep there. There has been also in other states repression against demonstrations and feminist movements like in Guanajuato, Quintana Roo, but nevertheless, we are still there pushing towards these changes. Some of us from the advocacy and other from social movements and other women bringing and supporting health services such as Siwame, as already Gadi told us. And we are all working from different perspectives and different approaches, but we are working together and we will not go anywhere.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Just to finish, I wanted to make a correction when I translated the name of the organizations that Gadi Aleli was telling us about, which is Mujer Luciérnaga. It's a woman firefly. I found it, women as a firefly. And I want to thank you very much, all
Can
I
just please, Edme, say something important? I remember now that Rebecca was talking about the 8th of March. 2 years ago, besides having this huge march, on the 9th of March, we had a national strike of women. And it was supported by enterprises. That means women didn't go to work and didn't do any work at home. We didn't do anything but reading maybe or staying. We didn't even go out for shopping. We didn't anything. We disappeared like from the society for one day. And it was amazing. Well, this is an idea that was launched in one of the Latin American feminist meetings about maybe 8 years ago, something like that. And then it was very important because you could see like there was no women on TV, radio programs, enterprises in the streets. And I think, well, something is happening now. Maybe there's going to be a strike. I don't think it's going to be that strong like 2 years ago, but it was very good to do that because they really felt the need of having women around, and it was good. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, all of you. And I also wanted to mention that apart from the World Culture Museum that is organizing these, we have 2 organizations that have been active in this organization, and that is Ayotzinapa for the human rights of Mexicans here in Sweden. And also another organization I represent, which is GADIP, Gender and Development in Practice, which is working very much on gender and international issues here in Sweden. And just addressing one of the questions, what can you do for women in Mexico? Try to approach us. These 2 organizations I just mentioned, GADIP and Ayotzinapa, we are working in several ways with other organizations in the world. I have been working very much with women organizations in Mexico. So try to approach us and see what you can do concretely to make things happen. And you will see one of these concrete things on Wednesday. So I invite you, all of you who have attended this, to come on Wednesday to the second webinar where we are presenting 3 other organizations, but also working concretely on this embroidery project to give attention to feminicides in Mexico, of which we are going to speak very much on Wednesday as well. So thank you to these fantastic participants. Thank you very much for this very rich information and views you have given us. And thank you to the public that has come. And this is going to be recorded or is being recorded, and you are going to see the link at the page of the museum. But for any of you, we are having in those 2 organizations I mentioned also a link to this webinar. So, muchísimas gracias por todo, por su participación, por su experiencia. Les deseamos todo lo mejor en las manifestaciones de mañana, que sean todo lo multitudinario que se pueda. Y bueno, nos vemos pronto otra vez. Thank you very much for this, and we hope that these demonstrations in Mexico are going to be as big and as impacted as they have been in the last years. Thank you. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you all.
Gracias a todas.
Bye-bye. Adiós. Gracias.
Gracias.
Bye.